All right, good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started with this phenomenal panel. In the welcome remarks this morning, Bryson spoke a lot about doing our part and community and things being pushed federally to the states. So I'm super excited to be here with this panel today. We are all occupying different spaces within cyber civil defense. So today we just really want to go on a journey of the people behind the scenes doing the work. So we'll spend a little bit of time on our backgrounds, what we're bringing to the table, our perspectives as we see it from just our different unique lens. So with that, I'll have you each just take like a 60-second snapshot of who you are. Please go into your background because this is being done for a reason to inspire others in the room, and then also give them a journey of how we are all doing something to move the needle forward, but we may have all arrived here very differently. And then also the organization that you represent.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jessica Walton. I am the U.S. Regional Director at Protect.ngo. We were formerly Cyber Peace Institute. It's going to take me like a year to, get used to that. I got put on this panel 45 minutes ago, so this is really gonna test my ability to public speak and also pull things out of my ass. So please. Bear with me. So my background, I started in the U.S. Navy around 16 years ago in cybersecurity. I really hated it and decided I didn't want to do that anymore. But guess what? I stayed in it. After that, I worked at DIA for a short time. I did my master's degree in international affairs here in DC at American University because I wanted to be a diplomat. And then I thought, well, that's too much like the military. So I went back into cyber threats. I went to Southcom. I live in Miami now. Don't be too jealous. I went to Southcom, and there I started doing open source intelligence. And I made a huge pivot doing some research and analysis work for what was formerly Cyber Peace Institute, which is a nonprofit. And I absolutely love it. And here I ended up as the U.S. Regional Director, so I must be doing something right. And I really enjoy this aspect of it. You know, sometimes I miss being the nerd behind the computer, but, I love being around people, talking to people, making connections, and making things happen. So that's me.
Hello. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Matt Altomare. I am the recently installed Senior Director for Cybersecurity Programs at the Aspen Institute. She started my career roughly around the same time, almost 2 decades ago, also in the military. Less cool, though, I was in the Air Force as an intelligence officer. Actually did not start my career in cybersecurity. I originally was part of JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command, so cut my teeth as a young officer focused on counterterrorism operations overseas, intelligence fusion, intelligence operational support, etc. Spent another 6+ years in the intelligence community after that, also involved in counterterrorism activities and operations. Also went back to grad school in DC. We did not plan this, just happened so they were aligned. But Johns Hopkins SAIS, a rival school, where I also studied strategic studies / international relations. That allowed me to pivot into government as a career civil servant. So I started 4 years at the Pentagon, and that's how I got introduced to cyber policy. So spent most of my time there helping oversee cybercom's offensive operations. Just after General Nakasone became the commander at that time, also supported the Secretary of Defense, the Undersecretary of Defense, National Security Council meetings with international partners, et cetera. Did a stint at the White House during that time period with OMB, so got a chance to be directly involved in Afghanistan Security Forces Fund almost a decade ago. And in the last 4 years, and I just left CISA in April, I was most recently the Chief of Operations for threat hunting at CISA. So I had a front row seat for Volt Typhoon and Salt Typhoon. This, of course, has been in the news. I know this group has talked about that and sort of had the opportunity to engage with CISOs in person to talk about these threats and talk about response efforts. Looking forward to the conversation today, and thank you for having me.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Netta Squires. I wear multiple hats. I am for the for-profit side, I'm the president of Cybersecurity and Resilience for Open District Solutions. We do whole of state solutions and consulting to state and local CISOs around the country and trying to see how we can leverage shared resources and things like that. For this purposes, for today, I am the executive director of the Center for Critical Infrastructure Security. We are a nonprofit that is focused on serving underserved critical infrastructure organizations. We are based out of Maryland, so we're starting there, but we are trying to grow around the country. We have two main initiatives. One is Think Like a CISO Academy, which is a clinic, which is going to take students and from Maryland currently, but again, sort of trying to grow slowly but surely and help organizations, critical infrastructure organizations, with things like incident response planning and disaster recovery procedures and things like that. And then our other initiative is the SC3I, which is the State Cybersecurity Cyber Civilian Corps. And so we are trying to help support states around the country build the civilian corps, and in coordination and collaboration with Protect.ngo, as well as with CLTC's Cyber Resilience Corp, and really trying to work at the government level to really help the state itself figure out where the best placement for putting that civilian corps is. So we'll talk more about later about the models and the this and that, but just since we're doing bios, but really short. My background is actually in emergency management, public safety, and that's how I got into cyber when I realized all these zeros and ones were coming to attack us. And so I was like, what do we have to do about that? And kind of started getting into the more technical side of things. So I've been doing this for about 20 years, and then law, policy, and then kind of again into the cyber world. So all these conversations over the last 2 days have been near and dear to my heart for the past 15 years of trying to get cyber into emergency management, into cyber, and cyber into emergency management, and all these sort of consequence management frameworks. So definitely looking forward to the conversation today. Thank you.
Hey y'all, you all hear me? Okay, cool. My name is Paul. I'm the program director for, oh, there we go. First time doing one of these things, if you couldn't tell. I'm the program director for the University of Chicago Cyber Policy Initiative, which is housed under the Harris School of Public Policy. My background is really not at all in cyber or technology for that matter. I was always terrible in math, couldn't code to save my life, disappointed my parents a lot. Went to, political science major, and then I did my master's in international relations, so kind of a commonality there. But via my background, I was born in the States, but grew up in Taiwan basically all throughout high school, and still have, very much friends and family there. So know there's been some talk about that floating around, obviously. So for me, it was interesting to kind of approach it from a geopolitical perspective, understanding what I do about, or thinking that I understand at least somewhat what the CCP's motivations are for carrying out these kinds of attacks, especially on US critical infrastructure, and what sort of, cascading effects that might have on the rest of the world. So that's really what kind of drove me to be interested in cyber. But right now we're mainly focused on two efforts. The first is on critical infrastructure, specifically for now on water and wastewater systems in America. Basically, providing free cyber volunteer support to some of these systems that may not have the resources or the bandwidth to kind of address these issues, and kind of addendum to that, like thinking about a way to develop a shared services model potentially as a way to scale this nationally. And then the other thing that we mainly do is write a report called the Hacker's Almanac, which every year covers basically the most cutting edge vulnerabilities found at DEF CON, which is it's like a big hacker conference that happens every year. So some ICS stuff in there for sure. Definitely encourage you all to check it out. But glad to meet you all. Excited to have this conversation.
Thank you all for doing that. I know oftentimes on panels, we kind of just say our name, our title, and we browse right past. but we're here to be also the connective tissue. And there's so many things that I've learned, like Netta, I didn't know you had previously been an emergency manager, so we definitely need to talk about undisruptible. And so there's just so many connections that I'm gleaning that hopefully everyone else is gleaning as well. And just personally, I think it's important to know someone's history and how they got somewhere and what's their passion behind it. So I'll go last because I also want to add comedian to yours, Jessica and Paul. I'm like, I'm getting clowned on my own panel. This is amazing. So just a little bit about me, Stephanie Ross. I'm the managing program director for Undisruptible 27. Thank you. If you really love it, you should nominate your hospital, but we'll get there later. Started out at the FBI. I was actually recruited out of grad school to go to the FBI. This is when they were doing the massive cyber hiring of all the cyber bodies. They shipped me off to Norfolk, Virginia, where I was the first cyber intel analyst. So it was, because it was a smaller office, it was cyber intel analyst / stand up our entire cyber workforce. So I actually started with the working groups, building them from scratch with Secret Service, with all the other intel communities. I was then recruited out of there to go into the intelligence community, and they shipped me off to fun places like Afghanistan and Jordan and all those various different places doing technical operations. I decided I wanted a family, and disappearing in the middle of the night to go overseas was probably not the right plan for me. So I pivoted to the private sector, where I was leading teams of engineers building surgical robots and various different things for manufacturers. And then that thump in my heart, that call came back to national security, because I think through and through, I'm a protector. I've always been a protector. And so I signed back up to come back to the government, joined CISA. I was one of the portfolio managers for the CIRCIA project, which is, depending on who you ask, is it going on right now or is it not? I don't know. And then once they went through their transition, my former boss introduced me to Josh. And so now here I am, still in a protective role that I'm enjoying, and that I'm still helping critical infrastructure. So I know a few of you already kind of jumped ahead, which is fine. But I really want to dig into your personal why, in addition to what is the problem that your organization is uniquely positioned to address, because I don't want to assume that the audience knows exactly what your organization does. They may have heard of it, but I kind of want to dig a little deeper of your personal why and then the association with your organization.
So Protect.ngo, one of the reasons that we changed our name is because you don't really have to guess what we do. We protect NGOs. So we offer direct cybersecurity services to nonprofits around the world. We take volunteers from industry. We have over 1,600 volunteers sitting in 52 countries around the world, servicing around 160 countries and millions of beneficiaries. So it's pretty cool. Specifically in the US, we co-chair a project, which you might have heard of, called the Cyber Resilience Corps. We co-chair that with the Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity. We are the tech backbone, so we are kind of like not the sexy ones. So everybody kind of forgets about us. CLTC puts on all the flashy conferences and they're amazing. They have all the reports and everything, but we're the guys in the background. We built out the platform, which I hope that you will go check out. And we are the ones that are calling all of the cyber volunteering groups. First of all, let me explain what the Cyber Resilience Corps is, just in case anyone is not familiar. So this is a coalition of cyber volunteering groups around the entire US coming together from different sectors. So these volunteers might be from State Cyber Corps. These volunteers might be focused on hospitals, might be focused on K-12 schools, focused on nonprofits like we are, focused on critical infrastructure, et cetera. Before there was CISA's high-risk communities network, and you were able to see where all of these volunteers sat in sort of a way, but not really. And we've actually, over the past year, and with the help of Craig Newmark, we've been able to actually map them out. And so we have all of the volunteer groups. I mean, there's probably still some floating out there, and if you're one of them, you better sign up today. So everyone is mapped out, and it gives an easy way for people to find the help they need when they need it, without scrambling around the internet, because we all know that when something happens, you don't really have time to do that. So, and then I guess my personal why for doing this work, I mean, so much of my work, you know, both in the military and then afterward, was focused outward. You know, I was very focused on international, you know, in the military, you're protecting like our systems from foreign actors, you know, so you're very focused on what are they doing and how can we protect this? And then, you know, when I worked at DIA, same thing. When I worked at Southcom, same thing. Well, what are they doing? What are they doing? What are they doing? I grew up in a rural area, very underserviced. And I mean, people relied on these services. They relied on nonprofits. They relied on small clinics. We had a rural hospital that when I was a kid was like, oh, it's kind of, you know, not good. And so, you know, it troubles me that in a lot of these areas, somebody could lose that hospital that's 30 minutes away, and then they might have to go an hour away. And we all know that that is the difference between life and death. You know, my family still lives there, so I care a lot about, I think the shift for me in my career is more looking inward and looking in the country that I live in, and then also the people that I live with, the communities that I'm around. And that's been a big shift for me, but a really rewarding shift for me. And that's my why.
So I'll start in reverse order. My why, I grew up in a military family. My father was in the Army for 26 years and then also served at the Pentagon for a few decades. It was kind of cool. When I was at the Pentagon, we could go grab lunch together, and sort of a unique experience to be able to go down to the basement and run into my father, who was a tank commander once upon a time. As you can imagine, living in sort of a military family, moving to different bases, being in the military myself, working in the US government, it's naturally developed a service-oriented mindset. Sort of mission is more important than any one individual. How can I enable and support something that's much bigger than myself? So of course, there was a natural place for that, serving in different parts of the US government and just doing that for my entire professional career. Last year, I was interested in opportunities where I could potentially be involved with sort of similar sense of mission and culture, but completely outside the government. And sort of just given where I'm at in my life, it was sort of the right time to take that leap and look for opportunities to be involved in a different manner. So luckily, I had the opportunity to join the cybersecurity team at Aspen Digital. And of course, it's great to see Craig here. We're incredibly grateful for all the support that Craig offers to us, as well as the partnership with IST and Undisruptible. And can't thank you enough. It's so cool to wake up every day and have dozens of people that are sort of all looking to do the same thing, which is help people, help institutions, help defend the nation from the bad guys. So I think it's rare in life where you can sort of get up out of bed and feel truly 100% positive about what you're doing every day. So I consider myself lucky and grateful that that's what I'm able to be a part of. In terms of what the cybersecurity program focuses on within Aspen Digital, Aspen's superpower is convening leaders and experts from across governments, industry, and civil society, and challenging them to solve intractable, wicked problems together. Aspen has an incredible network, an unbelievable reputation, and we have standing groups. There's a US group and a global group for cybersecurity leaders and professionals. And we also have our annual summit. And then we have events in between those 5 or 6 events a year. And each time it's an opportunity to bring sort of the titans of cyber industry, key government officials, civil society partners, cyber civil defense, sort of people that are in the foxhole with us, and try to tear apart the latest issue of the day, propose solutions, and then mobilize together and be able to do more together than we ever could have done sort of in one specific industry or one part of the government. As you can imagine, everything that's going on right now in the artificial intelligence cybersecurity space, the conversations are lit, as the kids would say these days. So one of the things I feel challenged to do is, I'm lucky enough to be in a meeting a few months ago where you have Palo Alto and Wiz and Google and CrowdStrike and insert sort of all the key cybersecurity companies, and there's unbelievable ideas, that are sort of being mentioned in the room. And I'm in a position along with the team to try to do something about those problems and pitch those solutions, whether it's engaging with Congress, interacting with the executive branch, working with civil society, philanthropies, et cetera. How can we sort of use that super friends group to be able to do more? And I think, as Josh said best earlier, whether government or private sector can or won't do something, that's sort of where we can help bridge that gap, shine a light on it, mobilize those resources, and hopefully address those problems.
So to start, I guess, with a why. I love what Stephanie said about Protect. I feel like I can relate to that very much. I grew up in Israel. During the Intifada, there were tons of bombings all the time. And so that sort of running towards the place to help, and, is kind of just something that we grew up with, and then so it went into public safety, went into first responder, and then kind of moved into that from first responder into emergency management over time. And so I think that's very relatable, that Protect at some point sort of moved into government, and really appreciate the government mission. I was the Montgomery County, Maryland for a long time, and then the director of local cybersecurity for the state of Maryland for a while. So truly believe in the government mission, and something that I think is really strong. And so when I left and started my for-profit, I learned that for-profit struggles a little bit in being mission oriented, right? You kind of have to, you still want to do all the same things, but it's hard to jump in and actually do them, which is why I founded the nonprofit, because I really felt the need to sort of continue that mission and be able to do all these things, and leverage the background and bringing the intersection of, public safety in general, as well as cyber, as well as being mission oriented, and just loving to build things and being like connecting the people around. I think so that was the why. I also think it's really fun to see things happen full circle. So being here today, but then also I'm actually supposed to speak at another event later in the day for Disaster Peace Institute. They're not Peace Institute, it's called Disaster Peace without the Institute, your former name. But it is the hospital coalition, the healthcare hospital coalition for Maryland. And what's interesting about it is these are the people I worked with 10 years ago that I begged them 10 years ago, hey, we got to do cyber. Hey, let's do cyber. Let's insert cyber. And they're like, yeah, no, not here, not there. And then I got a call like a couple of months ago, and they were like, so we're putting on this event. I think we're ready to do cyber. And I'm like, thanks. 10 years later, I can't believe you even have my number, but sure, I'll be there. And so I was really excited to kind of see that, there are a lot of organizations that are sort of moving to where, to where we need to be now, where in the intersection of these things. So definitely that's kind of the why. And what's great, I think, about doing it through a nonprofit lens and being able to work is that we can continue to work, with governments, with academia, with for-profit, and be the connector that can bring all of those private-public partnerships together, because they are all super important and have to play a part of the game. And just sort of thankfully having those relationships with state CISOs across the country or with local CISOs, and really having the nuanced understandings of what they are struggling with, and being able to bring that to the national table and then apply it in Maryland. I will say, just because I'm from DC, but I work in Maryland. Don't tell Maryland that. But because Maryland is very advanced when it comes to cyber policy and cyber legislation. We just passed this last session the Maryland Critical Infrastructure Act, with all the requirements that come through that. There's going to be a new director under the MCAC, the Maryland Coordination Analysis Center. Last year, we passed water sector requirements. The year before that, we passed Public Service Commission requirements for utilities. The year before that, we passed reporting. We passed directors. So, it's literally for the past 5 to 6 years, Maryland has really put a lot of effort and all the thank you to Senator Katie Hester put a lot of effort into making sure that cyber is really at the government level, the policies level. The Department of Labor has put in laws around, or not laws, well, also it started as a law to do clinics, and then the Department of Labor had to sort of actually make it happen. So doing these cyber AI clinics, a lot of investments in workforce development. And so being able to live in the hub of that, in the middle of that, and kind of see how well it can work. And then being able to take that again through the nonprofit to the national stage and be able to sort of help other organizations throughout the country apply some of those in their own flavors and ways and what works. But that's been really rewarding. So,
for me, I think I got into a little bit earlier, but I think my background in sort of certainly the emerging, or not emerging, but now a flashpoint issue of cross-trade and Taiwan, China has really brought a lot of this to the forefront. So kind of for me, it's like the inverse of what Jessica said. It's almost, it's like, for me, it helps to look inward to the US to understand what effects might be on the rest of the world. And I think that's something that sometimes may be hard to see domestically. But having grown up abroad, I think I'll just say that other countries sometimes have, whether it's fair or not, an outsized expectation of what the US's role in the world is. There's certainly a growing disconnect, in my opinion, between our view of that and the world's view. And so as a result, I think a lot of the effects that we see, for example, of a cyber attack on American critical infrastructure, may actually reach, the ripple effect may be a lot bigger than what people are talking about. Which is, I think maybe a little off topic for a conference based on American, ICS and sort of securing American critical infrastructure. But I think, really it's that the reach of that ripple effect is exactly why our adversaries are trying to target our critical infrastructure, because there's going to be like enormous effects, really, not just for our allies, but for our military bases abroad, and our military bases at home as well. So that's part of the reason I really wanted to engage in this, is because I think cyber not only has sort of this outsized reach now, especially given offensive AI and its implications, but also because of sort of the newness of the issue as well. Like, I think a lot of people are still focused on sort of traditional warfare, so to speak, when in reality, in my opinion, for example, on a situation like Taiwan, really any first salvo would most likely be something cyber related or a hybrid. And I think a lot of those factors, aren't being discussed. So, really for me, it was just kind of the newness of it, and also sort of the severity of the issue and the fact that people didn't seem to be talking about it as much as I hoped that they would. And so, I think hope that leads me to sort of the work that we're doing. Starting with water and wastewater, I think, back to what Jessica was saying, or maybe Netta, but the sort of the intractability of the issue is really what drives our organization as well. With water, for example, we know just for cyber alone, there's, I think, 500,000 vacancies that are going to be hard to fill in the workforce. So workforce development, in terms of supply is an issue. In terms of demand, it's hard to get water systems to even spell the word cyber, let alone understand what it is and want it. On top of that, there are 50,000 of those systems and 150 if you count wastewater. So, the sort of the scale and the reach again of the issue is really remarkable. And also the urgency as well, like organizations like IST, for example, obviously are doing a great job to highlight that. So for us, our approach to that is pairing cyber volunteers, most of them drawn from the DEF CON community. So the conference of, technologists and what I would call white hat, or, the good guy hackers, basically, who hack on behalf, to help people retrieve their ransomware, retrieve stuff that's been captured by ransomware companies, that kind of thing. These people who are really driven to help their country, we've been able to leverage sort of their manpower for free, to offer cyber services for water and wastewater systems across the country. for the better part of 18 months now. So it's really started with kind of a smaller pilot, but at least in terms of like getting into these systems and understanding what their networks look like, what their connectivity looks like, and even like a lot of times folks will come in and say, you guys need these solutions right off the bat. It's understanding, like, do they even have the ability to absorb these solutions? Do they have somebody on the ground who can like press the button for them? Because oftentimes that's really what it comes down to, beyond the resource constraint. So that's been really interesting. Of course, it's definitely laying the groundwork at this point, but slowly working towards something. And I think what's really great about this community, that Craig has so generously supported, as well as others, is like we're all kind of working on different parts of the patchwork almost. So for me, I know water is like 1 out of the 16 critical infrastructure sectors. So we're addressing a fraction of the 16th of the problem. But at the very least, I know somebody's looking at hospitals, somebody's looking at nonprofits. That's kind of the power, I would say, of this network. So it's really been great working amongst that.
Yeah, thank you for doing it. I think, sometimes, at least in my travels, and maybe you all can relate, when you're talking about such a big idea, people get lost, especially average day Americans, they get lost in that. And so I find that making it more human, putting your why behind it. I'm just not some person that's doing, hospitals and water, right? Like I actually care about these communities. And I feel that message comes across, like when we're talking about getting our 12 communities for undisruptible, that message comes across clearer than I just need you to sign up because we have to do research and we have, a number to hit, right? Like you're making that human connection. So thank you so much for going through your whys, because I think it does make it more human. It makes it more relatable. It's not this far off, distant topic that we're talking about. It's actually things that are happening now. And with that, I want to continue our journey, but I want to talk about what in your work is particularly important that you want this room to understand. What are some misconceptions and how do people get involved? I know and I'll start this time. I know for Undisruptible, you heard Josh talk a lot about, trying to get the 12 hospitals, trying to get the water facilities. I'll be honest, it's been easier to go to the hospital, but the challenge we're finding at the hospitals is I think we came in with the assumption that, the hospitals know that water is an issue. The hospital is still focused on ransomware, which is a big issue. Don't get me wrong. So they're not even computing in water. So for example, we had a tabletop exercise with a group of medical professionals. And so we said, well, what are the biggest threats you're facing? What would you do without water? And it was like a light bulb moment. They were like, water? Like we're thinking if we have downtime, it's ransomware. What do we need to do? But it was like, oh my God, if we don't have water, the whole facility is shut down. Where are our water? So we were having and witnessing in real time them processing through something that they've never even thought about, right? So we're having a little bit more success there versus, what Bryson and Josh talked about earlier, when you're going to the water facility, that one person you may talk to may be the janitor. He may also be the liaison person. He might, you know what I mean? That person is so overwhelmed in their role. So it's a little harder to get in. And sometimes when you do, it's more of we don't want you to tell everybody what you found, right? We don't want to be put on blast, as the kids say, right? About what's in our system, instead of taking it from a standpoint of, no, we're here to help you. We're here to fund this solution for you. Yeah, that may come with, yes, let's talk about some of the problems, only because other organizations may have these same problems. We may have to implement these same solutions across the board. So I think that's a little bit of what we're facing. Can you kind of talk about what you're seeing and some of the misconceptions with your work and all of the above?
Yeah, so I don't think that this will be news to anyone in this room, but this country is basically being held together with tape by nonprofits. And a lot of critical infrastructure are nonprofits. And I would also argue that most nonprofits are at least essential infrastructure. And so I think there's sometimes like this misconception of like, oh, it's kind of this, oh, nonprofits are like this kumbaya, like save the world, pie high in the sky. But I mean, these really are the organizations that are doing the work. And they, like I said, they're holding the nation together with tape, and they don't really have time to have somebody come and start throwing a bunch of terms at them that they don't understand and say, you need to do this, et cetera. I think what's most important is making sure that cyber and cybersecurity is accessible to these groups, which I know with Undisruptible 27 is one of the amazing things they're doing is like really, going into these kind of rural areas and trying to identify people that can talk to people in those areas because there's already trust established. I think it's also a difficulty when you're talking about some of these regions where there might not necessarily be that trust, and you're coming in and saying a bunch of big fancy words. Language is powerful, and the way that we use it can mean the difference between somebody taking that free help or not taking that free help. And I think another misconception is that people would be lining up out the door to get free services. It's not as easy as like a free t-shirt. I feel like people would line up outside the door for a free t-shirt, but if you're saying, hey, we could save you billions of dollars on, well, not billions, millions of dollars on like, not being cyber attacked, they're like, oh, well, where's the t-shirt line? I wanted something easy. So I think that's also something that I'm seeing happen in this space. I love the new Take 9 direction with the count because it's so accessible. It makes it fun, and talking about scams versus just, cyber attack and ransomware and all these big scary words that like make people's eyes glaze over and they don't really care. So I think I'll end there. I don't want to go into any of the next questions. But yeah, I think the most important thing is just making sure that we are able to take as much of the burden off of these other nonprofits, other critical infrastructure sectors, and get in and help them with as little fuss as possible, so that they can do their important work. And yeah, a lot of that sometimes just comes with changing your language, building the trust. So I'll leave it there.
Just the +1 on the reticence to accept free services often. So back sort of putting my old CISA hat on, I was often frustrated and shocked that sort of we're from the government, we're here to help. I know sometimes that's not received in the best manner possible, but we had some of the premier incident responders, forensic analysts who were ready and willing for free as fast as an entity would want to move to offer that sort of assistance. And surprisingly, and maybe not surprisingly to some of the people who are very experienced in this area, many people would not accept it. There's, of course, sometimes there's legal concerns, there's liability concerns, reticence to have sensors on your network, et cetera. But we, especially on the government side, experience that as well, which is challenging when you have sort of a mostly all volunteer model, especially in the critical infrastructure space. And that's oftentimes the only way you can gain insight into some sort of sophisticated nation state actors, tactics, techniques, and procedures in that environment. So that remains sort of a challenge. And kind of going off of what you were saying with communication, sometimes it's a misunderstanding, or they've never heard of CISA. Or they'll call it CISA. I like to say CISA. CISA, Courtney knows. So going back to like, how do you establish that human connection? How do you create instant trust in a room with a CISO who may have to go talk to their board the next day and explain to their board why they're having challenges, or what they're doing in response to this new incident, or why they're accepting help from this sort of weird small new government agency? So excuse me, we've experienced something similar in the government. Taking a step back to the Aspen Digital cybersecurity program. So our priorities, scam fighting is critical. Craig, of course, is sort of the godfather and the creator for our Take 9 program, and we collaborate closely with him on that campaign. Of course, just got into year 2 and the count part of that. There's also other projects that we're pursuing where we can help with
government and non-government partners to counter frauds and scams more broadly around the world. So that's something we're extremely excited about. We are also trying to, again, do what we can amongst this, in a good way, crowded space for critical infrastructure protection and resilience. I think what we could potentially bring to the table are our relationships with federal government, both on the congressional side and the executive branch side. Of course, we don't have a monopoly there on that either, but then we also have some of those key C-suite level individuals that work for the critical cybersecurity community, companies, excuse me. And the hope is, as you sort of find good ideas that you can implement, you can become more of a do tank than a think tank. And sort of our challenge is, we understand the priorities: fighting scams, countering fraud, helping solve the problems created by emerging technology. So of course, quantum was mentioned earlier, artificial intelligence, helping protect critical infrastructure with this awesome cyber civil defense community. And I think we're adept at acknowledging the problem. I think we're great at surfacing ideas and recommendations and even putting compelling pieces of paper out there, usually digitally, into the ecosystem. But then how does that use the levers of power, whether it's in the government or the private sector, to make a lasting difference? So for me personally, that's sort of what I am focused on, and sort of been there for 2 months. So I've tried to do the best I can within 2 months, but I will sort of judge my ability to enable our team by that sort of report card. Is, yes, we established a problem, we're working a project, we've got ideas, but did we actually move the needle on the do side, which sort of may be somewhat different for sort of a think tank world, where we all just sort of use our hand, throw our hands in the air and pontificate and then have drinks and then go home and do it again. That's fun and awesome, but I would love to sort of take the next step, and sort of all the support that we have, how can we turn those into results? And sort of close it out, right? How do we communicate effectively? I know that's incredibly important to Craig. How can we and others, and he does an excellent job himself of communicating this challenge, how do we break through the news cycle? How do we break through someone's daily lives? Take 9 is outstanding at that. Like, what are the other sort of Take 9 like efforts for some of these other key cybersecurity challenges?
Yeah, I have to +1 on the free resources, +2, I guess, at this point. When I was with the state, with Maryland, we built an ISO program, Information Security Officer, literally cohorts of people that can go do assessments and remediation. We fought tooth and nail to get the program passed. And, and then finally, you fight leadership, you fight everyone in the system, right? You get the SLCGP funding, all the things you can do to get it off the ground. And then you're like, we did it. Hey, everyone sign up. And it's like pulling teeth trying to get, the locals to actually end up signing up. You're like, what just happened, right? How did this? So I think, it is definitely a problem. And, just to echo, it's not necessarily always that easy. But I think one of the things that I've sort of on the mismatch or misconception part is, it's not just a resource gap. Of course, resources are dwindling, but it's a resource allocation problem, right? Is like how there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of students that are all looking for work. They're there, they want it, they're learning, they're doing the work, they're trying, they just don't have the opportunities. We have all of these critical infrastructure sector that are too small to, they don't have anyone. Even if you gave them an assessment from, every year, they would be like, thanks. And now what would you like me to do with it? Right. They have nothing to do with it. It doesn't help to have an assessment. Not that it's important, of course, but it doesn't help because they can't do anything about it. So we need to find a way to take all those. And there's this sort of workforce gap that's being created because AI is taking all these junior roles. And so now these students are never even going to be able to get that junior job to become the experts afterwards to do the work. And so I think what we need to figure out a sort of a better way, which is what we're trying to do partly through the clinic, but the clinic model, I should say, but is how do we take all of those, not just students, but graduates and people or career transitioners, right? People who want to do the work, are willing to still be at that, need to be at that junior level, right? And how do we connect them and put them, allocate them into these positions that can be that can support the critical infrastructure sector that needs them so badly, right? And so you have, like the one adult in the room, right? The one person who can actually be the responsible person who can guide the instructor, the eyes, the last call, and be able to help all of the. It's a win-win situation. It's like a non-brainer, right? So it's creating more of that. It's creating. I know we have the consortium of cybersecurity clinics. I was really thankful to attend the Clinic of Clinics the other day and just see like what different organizations are doing and how they're supporting. And it's taking that sort of model of the clinic model, so to speak, the hands-on work, but turning it into practices around the country that I call it the Cyber Red Cross, right? Like, how do we create those? And we have that, and that's what this is about, right? The civil defense. That's what the Cyber Resilience Corps is about. It's about finding the people who want to do the work and connecting them with the organizations. But I think what we're missing is like the Red Cross, the Medical Reserve Corps, the umbrella that holds them, that makes it something that's ongoing and not that we have to sort of replicate over and over again. And I will say every state is very, very different, right? We're working, Wisconsin is like the golden model for their CRT, their cyber response team. They have 450 people who are signed up as volunteers. They've been doing this for over 10 years. They've saved millions of dollars. They're like the golden standard for civilian corps. But we see this all over the country, right? Florida now, there's actually a group of emergency managers that were kind of also realized the cyber problem and created their own Central Florida cyber group and created an NGO and got Homeland Security funding to help them. So, in Arizona, Ryan's team has a whole host of services, right, that they can do and put together. So their need is going to be very different. They have a student SOC. That's another way to get those people in, to get students who can actually do the work to help support the locals and the critical infrastructure sector. So I think it's a combination of understanding every state separately and understanding, who is best positioned, right? In Arizona, it may be the Homeland Security team and Ryan's shop is under the CISO. In another state, it may be the association of counties, or it might be whoever that sort of champion is, or an academic institution, or often not an academic institution because they have a lot of red tape, right? But how do we take those models and scale from the clinic model and move it up to become like they become now the resilience core for that state, for that locality? If it's Texas, you've like the RSOCs are all over the country, right? Or all over the state because they have 7,000 jurisdictions. So how do we develop those teams who are now, they've gone through that clinic model through the RSOC? How do we create them to be the next resilience corp? And I think what we need to do is give them the umbrella to do that, right? Like be the Cyber Red Cross that they can sign up for. That is something that's like ubiquitous around the country. And we see this again, going back to the emergency management analogies, like, there's Team Rubicon, right? So Team Rubicon does a lot of the building post disasters. That's what they focus on. They do the actual construction. And then you can scale it up because you can have, it's like, we say in emergency management, events start with the locals and ends with the locals. So you kind of scale up and scale back down, right? So maybe the local team can do it, but maybe you need to move to the regional Cyber Red Cross team. Then maybe you need to move to the national, depending on how many resources you need, right? And then you kind of dwindle it back down as the, and so maybe one is better at doing pen testing, another is better at doing, helping to support MFA, another is better doing disaster response. But you can really build it up with that umbrella. And I think that's kind of what we're trying to do in the micro level at CCIS at the Maryland, just to kind of see how it works and help work with states like Florida. Now we're trying to work with them. I know Michael Rizik, who works with us, is also doing work with New Jersey and the state of Washington. And so I think there's a lot that we can sort of help support that resource allocation, not just the actual like resources that we need more of, but they are there. We just need to put them correctly in the right boxes.
Kind of two-finger on that briefly. So just something, I apologize, I know I'm kind of going out of order here, but that capacity that Netta just discussed is so critical, especially right now with sort of the mythos moment that we are in, OpenAI 5.5 cyber. I think we all know the consensus is anywhere from 3 to 6, maybe 9 months. I'm pessimistic. I think it's going to be in a few months, where the capability to discover new vulnerabilities at machine speed is going to be broadly available in open weight and open source models probably by the fall. So what the heck do we do as a country when that inevitably occurs? Remediation, et cetera. Sort of the patch apocalypse, the Volnageddon situation, it is coming. The sort of, using these different mixed metaphors, the tsunami wave is approaching. How do we surge advice and capability at scale to most of the country, particularly critical infrastructure, state and local governments, when that inevitably happens? And I think this network is sort of front and center and available for us to utilize now. We just have to sort of, as a community and working government and non-government, to coalesce around that moment and act. We cannot wait. We cannot operate under the former playbook of 40 plus days of patching according to your change management processes when these vulnerabilities are discovered and used in hours, if not minutes. And I know it's like the news cycle is overwhelming, but to me, that is sort of the through line throughout all of this right now since April. And I can't sing the praises enough of these 3 individuals and their organizations. And I think our collective challenge is, how do we tap into that as soon as possible? Because I don't think we're going to be able to wait for us to figure out who gets access and who doesn't, and sort of what's the playbook. I think we have to sort of lay that groundwork in the next few months, or else I think we're all going to have serious regrets as a nation.
I thank you. First of all, thank you. When I was with Montgomery County, Office of Emergency Management and Homeland Security, one of the things we did was I was part of the National Capital Region planner committee or team. So we had to plan a cyber exercise. This is back in 2019, right? I did a cyber exercise for the entire region. And it's really hard because we had all the CISOs pushing back, like, this would never happen. Nothing would ever affect the entire region. This is never going to happen. There's no event. We had the emergency manager say, nothing's ever, like, this is unrealistic. Nothing is ever going to affect our entire region, wherever no one will be able to help anyone. We already have all of our mechanisms established for resource sharing and scaling up. We do this all the time. And then COVID hit. And guess what? No one could help anyone because everyone was dealing with their own thing. And I remember it just so, it was like, our exercise ended up getting canceled and we only did it because of COVID, but it was literally, that is exactly what happened. So to your point, that is what's coming on the cyber front, where no one's going to be able to help anyone. And so we are going to be very reliant on those community-based organizations. During COVID, we had just written the volunteer donations management plan for the county at the time. We deployed every single part of our plan. The MRC and the CERT and the Red Cross and everyone and all the organizations that never even existed before, that all of a sudden we deployed all of our volunteers because that is what was necessary at the time. And if we don't prepare for those kind of civil resilience corps at the local level where communities can actually come together, help, because that is what's coming. And so we just need to do the same thing and apply it to the networks. And there's so many students who want to do this work and people who want to do it. So I think we have the resources. We just need to, sorry.
No, you're good. Like the words right out of my mouth. I just maybe 2 things real quick to go back to the like free as in free kind of concept. Definitely an observation for us as well. I actually recently, we were talking to like a township and they were very much interested in our services. We got on a call with them. They were like, yeah, that sounds great. Send over some volunteer resumes. We'll take a look. Sent some over. Didn't hear back for like a month. And then, they told us like, hey, we're going to go in a different direction. We decided to prioritize other stuff going on. Like obviously this is free, but like it still takes time. So we get it. Later on, we find through a volunteer that worked for like a local cyber company that they had hired that company for like 50 grand to do a very basic service. And again, like this is something that we would we would have done. Like, honestly, I would have paid them money to do it for them. You know what I mean? Like, that's how I feel about it at this point. But then talking to the volunteer, they're like, why don't you guys just charge like $5 for your service, and then maybe that'll bring more credibility to it. And I'm personally, I think that's a slippery slope, but it kind of does beg the question, like, what is sort of the right answer here for people who may see cyber either as something that they just don't know anything about, so they trust somebody who's selling it to them rather than giving it to them, or they've only purchased cyber services in the past, so they expect to be paying for it, which is an interesting question. I still think that volunteerism is the way forward, and certainly it's done really a lot, but how can we kind of frame this, maybe in a different way to make people think that they're investing something in it up front, to be able to like actually have that connection all the way through. And then on the AI piece, we go to a couple of water conferences here and there, like in various states, just to kind of try to talk to folks, get in touch with stakeholders, reach actual water operators on the ground. And at some of these already, like, I'm by no means an AI person. I'm definitely a skeptic, and that is not well-founded at all, so don't listen to me. But there's a lot of like vendors now that are selling AI systems and services, and while they may not be they may be very honest about what they're selling. Like, listen, all we're doing is just we're helping you automate your cataloging so that you don't have to drive out to one pump, read the number, drive out to another pump, read the number, right? Like, it literally feeds back. But that, and honestly, anything cyber that people don't really understand gets kind of twisted and turned into like a much more grandiose thing a lot of times, right? So then they might be thinking, oh, wow, well, I just bought a service that'll help me like automate, red and blue teaming on my system. But in reality, it's like falls way short of that. So again, it's not, like the dishonesty or anything. It's just kind of people may take things to be, they like tend to think of the extreme, right? When you think of cyber, it's like some guy sitting in front of a computer hacking their way into your system. That might be the case, but there's a full range of services you can address before that, and should address before that. So, with this coming down the pipeline, definitely the threats of it, but also thinking about how the defenses are being sold to people, are being portrayed to them, whether or not they understand what's being put in their systems. And then to compound all of it, it's like, I don't really have an answer, but it's like, what else are we going to do if not dropping automated agents into these systems, given our workforce shortage, given that it's going to be growing because of these threats? So it's almost, again, it's kind of one of those intractable problems. And I know I'm just throwing out questions that don't have any answers at this point, which is like the worst thing you can do. But that's just, some of the things we've been thinking about, and they're already coming to bear in water and wastewater. And if that's the case in water and wastewater, which, in our view is moves a little slower on this stuff, then it certainly has already made its way into other critical infrastructure sectors. So
I'll say continuing to call for action. We definitely should stay in touch moving forward as we already do. But I think particularly on this issue, because our hope is, as part of our upcoming convenings, we are lucky enough to have companies that participate in Glasswing at the table. So one of the things that we're going to ask them to sort of talk about is lessons learned. Mm-hmm. How do they apply this capability in their environment? What did they learn from sort of that experience? How can that be scaled to other stakeholders? What tools are available now that doesn't rely on Anthropic or OpenAI being able to give them access to exquisite capabilities to be able to sort of still defend themselves. Mm-hmm. So stay tuned. Hopefully we can get some really good nuggets of knowledge out of there. And then that's where we turn back to this community and see what can be sort of proliferated.
And I think your point on resource sharing is so important and needs emphasis, because that's right. I think that's part of we see in states, for example, we have what we call whole of state solutions, right? Sorry, I'm going to pick on you again, Ryan, but I think Arizona, for example, has the biggest model of a whole of state solution. They have EDR for all their locals, and not just for the state agencies, but for all of the locals, the tribal nations, all their critical infrastructure, a lot of other resources. We see this in Florida, for example. They have a $30 million fund, which they realize that is about $300 million worth of services, right, that organizations can use. this is happening already around the country, around the state and local model. If we can take the same model and do that resource allocation sharing for these organizations, right? And say, here, I'm just naming a vendor to him. It's not, I have no relation, like here, okay, here vendor who does threat hunting, like here's X amount of money to help support this many organizations, right? To actually like be the tool and solution. And we're kind of doing the opposite of that, actually. So we're launching a cyber organization search website, which actually helps the small organizations connect with vendors who are willing to do the work for small organizations, because that's the flip side, right? Is they can't find vendors that are willing to serve the 1 or 2 or 3 endpoints. So we've just launched this website essentially to help vet it, to help smaller organizations, that nonprofits or organizations, doesn't matter, critical infrastructure providers, be able to find vendors who we're vetting separately, who are willing to do the work with very small community. But I don't think that's actually the solution. I think that's what we're having to do now, because we need that at this moment. But what we need to do is create the larger umbrellas of tooling, where a bunch of, you kind of buy the endpoints in bulk, and then you give them out to these organizations. And I think to your point earlier, yes, at some very minimal cost, but at a cost so that they understand the value of it. And we saw that with the MSISAC. When people got things for free, they did not appreciate it until it was taken away. And then they appreciated the value of everything that was free.
And thank you so much for that. Now, today you have been introduced to 5 different organizations that are within the civil defense space, but there's room for more, and that we are just a small portion that make up this ecosystem. You've hopefully learned about us being real people facing real problems and trying to come up with solutions. And we need your help, right? We have Slack channels, we have ways to volunteer and to get involved. And you've seen our perspective, and you've actually seen collaboration take place in real time, which I think is pretty awesome for this panel. But we thank you for your time. We hope that you will also get involved with our organizations and just help us make the world safer. Thank you so much.